yeah, we'll kind of just go from there. But welcome everybody. I'm excited for everybody new that's on. This is a great group. For those of you that are new, we'll give it a few more minutes as more people log on. For those of you that are new to the presentation or are new to our group, we host these every other Friday, specifically around textiles, and then every Thursday around a variety of different topics. Hi, Josh, welcome. I'm glad to see you. This will be a good conversation, and I welcome any questions you guys have, any, to dive into discussion. But I invite you guys to come back. The link that I sent out or that we share is a reoccurring link. The speakers or the presentation just changes. We do open it up for discussion, but just be mindful of your time and of other people. This isn't about selling or pitching necessarily, but more about educating, learning, and so forth. I hate that I have to say that, but there have been a few runaway mics, and so I'm going to say that. Other than that, you guys, I'm really excited. Welcome, Michela. I'm happy to have you. I'm happy to talk about what you're doing. I've been following what you're doing, and the more and more we're in the hemp industry and we talk about growing an industry or building it, the track and trace or the seed to garment or seed to cradle is a topic that comes up, and how do we provide that credibility in the industry? And so I'm excited to bring this conversation up as we're developing, so we're not trying to fix problems, but rather than implement good solutions. And so we have some great people on. Again, I welcome you guys to ask questions. If you guys want to put anything in the chat, I can ask. Other than that, you guys have keys or little icons at the bottom. You can raise your hand. I'm happy to call on you. Keep yourself on mute when you're not presenting. Other than that, welcome and thank you. I'll turn it over.
Okay, so good morning, everyone. For me, it's actually evening. Thank you for having me. I'm Michela Puddu. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Haelixa, a startup spin-off of the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology, where the solution we provide has been originally established. The company has been founded in 2016, and since then we have been providing traceability solutions to mark and trace different products, commodity or luxury materials from source until the finished good. And we have been focusing in the textile and fashion industry quite a bit over the past 2 or 2.5 years. So we have solutions really to trace all the natural and synthetic fibers materials. So I'm going to share some slides with you to guide you through what we're doing. Are you able to see? I believe so. Very good. So sustainability today is more than just the label. I hope you agree with that. So it's more than just a product tag saying ethically made or sustainably sourced, but has become a mandate. And this not just because the increased consumer demand for transparency, but also because there are more and more regulations coming up, making companies accountable for what happens in their supply chain. And the hemp industry is no exception, and actually has been since the very beginning very, very regulated, and therefore sustainability and therefore transparency and traceability become there even more important. Now, verifying the sustainability of clothes, of garments, is very complex, as complex, I would say, as their value chains. So unlocking the complexity, this complexity through traceability of materials is the first necessary step to implement credible sustainability. And greenwashing has made it even more challenging to judge if a garment is truly sustainable or not. So to truly answer stakeholders' demand for sustainability, company will have to substantiate more and more their product claims. And over the years, several certification schemes have been established to increase transparency and responsibility in textile supply chains. And more recently also blockchain. Blockchains have been introduced as a solution to record product data in a way that cannot be tampered. However, often this solution have proven unable to verify that product claims were true. So how are these systems failing? I'm gonna show you this in the slide. So chain of custody system, be it paper-based or blockchain-based, miss the physical link to the real-world product, to the actual material, which makes them vulnerable to fraud, because that's what can happen. So what can happen is the certificate or a documentation is used to sell a type or a quality of fiber which is different than the one stated. So at Haelixa, we found a way to substantiate product claims by turning product into carrier of the information about their own origin and their integrity. The technology is based on the use of DNA markers. So as for humans, for individuals, basically, we provide a product with a unique and traceable DNA identity. Now, these markers are displayed on the material, and here you have the example for the cotton at the farm or potentially any other location in the supply chain, and stay linked to it throughout the whole production, throughout the whole product journey. So in this way, the product information travels always with the product itself and cannot be manipulated nor removed. Now, what sets us apart is the extreme versatility of the solution, but also the reliability of the detection. So basically, at any point in time, the companies that work with us can submit their product to a quick and reliable verification test to unravel the journey of the product and ultimately verify or disprove if it really is what is claimed to be. Anytime that we perform a verification test, basically, we issue a certificate report, typically with a yes/no answer, and the record is uploaded in our tracking system, which is eventually shared with our client's partner, unless they already have the EPR system in place. And in that case, we can plug the information in their own data storage system. So as mentioned, the system is extremely versatile in the sense that it can be applied virtually to any material, so any fiber, natural man-made fiber. It can be applied at any step of the supply chain, so on the raw material, but also eventually on following steps on yarn and even on fabric. The system is very easy to implement and to apply. So the markers are very easily applied by spraying by local personnel following very simple instruction. It can be easily the application automated, and also very important, the product does not affect the production steps. So basically the garment making can be carried on as usual. The markers are harmless, so they do not have any effect on humans, on the environment, and they're also GOTS and Ecotech standard compliant. So these are the key feature of our solution. And now I would like to briefly explain you why companies work with us. So as mentioned, the current way of tracing materials along the supply chain is to use still paper trail. But documentation certificate can be copied, falsified, or replaced. But the unfalsifiable marker is always there, proving that the product is really what it claimed to be. So in this way, we really help company providing through transparency and through traceability. Given that our product verification as a forensic validity, we provide reliable data that can help company, manufacturer, or brand to substantiate product claims related to origin, to quality, or to processing. And finally, also the mark is a label of authenticity, if you like, that they ensure the identification and also the differentiation on the market of product that are special or differentiate through quality, processing, design, or fabric type. So we are B2B. Again, we work mostly with manufacturers and brands. And here you can see the logos of some of the companies we work with. Additional recognition has been received from organizations such as the Organic Cotton Accelerator we work with, and from the United Nations Economic Commission for Europe. We are part of a program to help the UNICEF basically drawing some guidelines and also implementing a solution to bring transparency into the garment and footwear industry. We have validated our solutions on many textile materials. So we have basically now a portfolio that cover the main and natural and man-made fiber. Again, this can be applied at any step of the supply chain. And I mean, the reason why I'm here today is that we believe that this could also support hemp supply chain. If you look at what is happening today in the industries, that several supply chains, so some of those you're looking at here, so cotton, wool, cashmere supply chain, are trying to reverse engineer basically their structure. So companies are mapping their supply chain, and once they've mapped their supply chain, they are looking at systems to manage traceability. And this exercise or retro-engineering supply chain is quite expensive and laborious, as you can imagine. So I think the opportunity that you have here is that the hemp industry has the opportunity to do it right from the beginning. So to build this transparency and traceability from scratch and do it right from the start. Also, the COVID pandemic has driven the supply chain restructuring agenda, let's say, forward. So has underlined even more the need for flexible and transparent supply chain. This is not going to change in the future, but it's going to be even reinforced. So again, I'm here because we see that we could support you in establishing a new level of openness and accountability across the hemp supply chain. So I'm very happy to discuss here, I mean, during this meeting or even in the following days with any of you who could be interested and see the potential in a solution like ours.
Awesome. Okay, thank you so much. I'm going to open this up for questions. I don't know if anybody has any questions they'd like to ask. I'd love to, I've got to change the view on my screen. I just see, there we go. I'm going to be able to call on everybody. Does anybody have anything that they'd like to add or any questions right off the bat before I dive into some of these questions? I see John's on the phone. I see Mr. Patel is on the phone. Do you have any input that you'd like to add, Josh? Any of you? I know this is definitely right up your alley.
Yeah, I think for me, the traceability, you know, sustainability, I think I said on the last call I was in with you guys that I think traceability has to come now with sustainability. Those two words have to be together. We've produced fiber, we've got processing in Europe currently, and that is one of the biggest aspects that we have, or challenges, I should say, with the brands that we work with. They want to see that traceable supply chain. They want to know where the fiber was grown, and you know, how that's worked through the supply chain, and to be able to tell the story, right? Because hemp's got such a wonderful story. It's a really important part of this whole thing. Yes, you've got great properties of hemp in USPs and products, but without telling the story, you're really going to miss half of the benefit of hemp. So I think this traceability sounds really interesting. I'd love to get my head around more how you implement it through those steps in the supply chain, how you would work with that farmer. I think there's so many farmers who are growing with different SOPs, you know, some in a, you know, without using irrigation, some with irrigation, how that is going to be mapped through the supply chain, and how you can use those figures to help you. I mean, one of the big things for us is the Higg index that all the brands use to kind of see where the environmental credentials of products that they're going to use are. It's terrible for hemp. And I think one of the biggest challenges the hemp industry has is to really change that aspect of it. And traceability is going to be a huge part of that. So any work that's being done on traceability is really interesting. But to understand how you work with the different stages would be, could you elaborate on that a little bit?
Sure. So first of all, the technology can be used for different purposes. So you can trace back to the source, but you can trace a specific process or a specific step that is sustainable or particularly worth, let's say, being differentiated and traced. So what we do is basically we adapt to the supply chain need and situation. So let's say if the interest is tracing back to the source, what we would do with that, we would apply the marker right at the source, because that's the only way to be able to then identify the source back. And typically you would apply on the raw material post harvest, using some spraying system, which can be easily automated. So it is very straightforward and require minimum investment from the side of the implementing company. So basically what we provide our kits with the formulation. The formulation contains this specific marker, which is unique, for instance, for that farm or that manufacturer, and then I contain this tool for the spraying, for the application and extraction, and then that's easily basically done. And then again, there is the need for also verification. So what we also provide is the verification service. So we receive samples of intermediate step in a way that we can verify that every individual step of the supply chain things going well and nothing got confused or manipulated accidentally or not. So this is what we do. We also, in cases where companies do not want to rely on us doing the verification because they want to have a system to manage internally their supply chain, then in that case, we also enable them to do testing and verification independently or relying on third-party labs that work with us. But in the most common way, we are the one providing the verification because it's also what company wants. That is a third party, a neutral third party doing the test and proving claims. Because if they would do it themselves, it would be a kind of self-certification system, so it wouldn't be as effective.
Very cool, thank you. Mandy, I think you're on mute. Sorry.
That's the phrase of the year. Gotham, your turn.
Yeah, hi guys. So I'm just going to add upon what Josh said. I don't know, when you talk about markers, like how does that work? I'm gonna like put it in layman terms. Is it like a paintball game, like you shoot someone and they find at the end of the game, okay, this guy got shot. Is it like that, or do you inject the hemp with it? I'm sorry, I'm not like I'm not a chemical engineer, or can you please explain about that?
So basically, you would shoot everything with that. So it's sprayed in an homogeneous and uniform way, so that each individual fiber would carry the unique marker. And so you would be able anytime to do the test on the whole, on each individual item of a lot. You wouldn't do it routinely. You would do some sampling and verification on a number of samples of product that is statistically representative for that supply chain or that step. But in principle, you could do it on every individual item, because every item would carry on each fiber the marker. Does that help or answer your question?
Maybe I need to try it out, because if it's on a large scale, like 100 acres, then is it possible to trace it?
Absolutely.
Okay. Then I should try it before I ask more questions.
Josh, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry to keep asking questions, but I find it really interesting. So just to talk through a little bit the kind of steps that this would happen. I know that from a brand perspective, they want us to use as little inputs as possible, and having a farmer go out and add a spray onto a crop, drive a tractor around potentially, hundreds of or thousands of acres, is going to be an extra input from driving a tractor and inputs that way. When would you say was the best time to spray it? Would it be sprayed, but just before you harvest it? Would you spray it during the retting period? And how would that affect the retting period? I'm trying to think of how, if we're trying to minimize inputs to have the best carbon footprint of the fiber, which is a challenge.
Yeah, so absolutely good question. So first of all, typically we apply post-harvest, and typically we try to also apply by simply adding the formulation to an existing step. So I can give you an example. In cotton, sometime when the cotton is moisturized, we add the formulation in a way that you are not kind of adding an extra step and you're using the water that is used anyways. So we can think of something similar. So we are not very active in the hemp industry. So we don't have the experience to advise you yet on exactly which point, but it's something that we would figure out together, and we're very interested in doing that exercise together. It could make sense to do it before directing, or it again depends what is the goal. If it's identifying the source right from the farm, then you would apply it on the raw material before directing. Otherwise, you could apply it on the cottonized fiber. This is something that we would discuss and align and pilot together.
Yeah, very cool. Because I think that makes sense. If it's truly traceable, they want to see it from farm to finished product. So yeah, it's about working out.
We have tested it on multiple supply chain, and we survived all the steps of dyeing, finishing, spinning, weaving, whatever. All the harsh chemicals and temperature that I use, we survived. So I believe we would also survive retting, but we should test that.
Very cool. Thank you.
I'm on mute again. I thought I had another question on here. What about cost of implementation?
So the initial investment is very low, because basically you don't need any equipment, but the spraying that we provide and is absolutely neglectable. So what you have to pay for is the package we provide that include again this formulation to be sprayed and some tests which are provided per ton or kilo of material to be marked. So the cost typically is related to the volume. So the lower the volume, the larger the volume, the lower the cost, and also on the complexity of the supply chain. So I cannot give an exact estimate without knowing the supply chain's, let's say, details, requirement, and volumes involved. The example for cotton, basically, it's few cents per t-shirt, basically, at the end of the day.
It's what did you say?
I can give the example for cotton. At the end of the day, what we are charging on the final garment is few cents for t-shirt, for instance, just for you to have reference.
Okay.
Is it a water-based? Did you say it was water-based?
Yeah, it is water-based, and I think could be interesting for you to know, I mentioned it briefly, that we are approved by the GOTS. So we are the only marker that is actually compliant with GOTS. So as you can imagine, if we are approved to be using organic cotton, that means that we would not alter the organic nature of cotton or any other fiber. So it's water-based, it's non-toxic, is vegan, organic, however you wanna define it. And what is important is also that the actual marker is very low in concentration. So we work at part per million or even below that. So very minute amount of the marker are sufficient to ensure reliable traceability.
Very cool. Okay, so this always comes up when we start implementing technology like this is fraud, right? People being able to utilize the same technology to manipulate the system. You know, what type of conversation or discussion has been had around this in the past?
So the system is tamper-proof in the sense that the marker cannot be removed nor retro-engineered, so you cannot fake it nor you can take it off. Therefore, the information that the product carries, the material carries, always true representation of reality. That's how we actually help fighting fraud. Yeah. And also, I think in this sense, it's important to know that the analysis, the testing is based on a key lock mechanism, which means you need to know what you are looking for to detect the marker. So you couldn't go just there with a scanner and figure out something is there if you don't know what you're looking for. So the forensic analysis is really based on this mechanism for which you kind of need to know what you're screening. Otherwise, you wouldn't get a signal from the device. If that's clear.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, any other questions that come in? I would love to hear more about this, or I'd love to introduce a few of you also while we're on here. I don't know if Mr. Peddle, would you like to introduce yourself? I'd love to hear from you, kind of get some discussion going.
Otherwise, I can ask questions. we reverse the...
Yeah, you're on mute, sir.
Is there anyone using any physical traceability system, like similar to our, or is thinking about it?
I was on mute. I didn't realize that.
Yeah, I'd love to introduce. She was just asking if anybody else is using any system similar to hers or any traceability system at all. And you being in the industry, what are you seeing in the industry? What's being, Josh, I see you nodding your head.
Well, my question will be, working in the industry for so many years, how do you convince a manufacturer or any supplier to use your system? Because they are so secretive. Many of the suppliers, many of the manufacturers are so secretive, they don't want to release any information of what they're doing. So that will be a big challenge.
I mean, there is a clear advantage for, I mean, not only for the brands, but also for the manufacturing using our solution, because basically they can by validating their claim or being able to prove their claim to the brands, they can become their preferred suppliers. So now that transparency and traceability are more and more imperative, I mean, the consumer are demanding for it, and therefore brands to satisfy this demand will also demand it from the manufacturer that have to comply with this demand. So the manufacturer that we will be able to provide this transparency will be the one in the end, the manufacturer, the supplier of choice of the brand. So they have opportunity to surely ensure the trust, the loyalty of the brand, to gain additional market share, and in some cases even charge a premium, we have seen.
No, I agree with it.
Okay, anybody else? Josh, I saw you raise your hand, and then Tom, go ahead.
I don't want to hog the microphone like you said at the beginning. I just really support what Michela's just said. You know, we supplied a global brand with some fiber, and a product sat on shelves for a few months because they wanted us to get the traceability, a certificate from the people who grew the fiber to say it wasn't irrigated. And so you asked the question of, is anybody doing any traceability? We had to go to the company, who then had to go to the farmer and get a declaration signed by the farmer, then the company, all the way through to the brand before they would put that to market to be able to speak to the claims that they wanted to make. So Mr. Patel makes a really valid point, but I think I agree with Michela completely as well, that I think it's going to add benefit rather than restrict. I think people want now to be traceable. So I think it's really cool.
Thank you, guys. Tom, go ahead.
So from what I understand, the biggest problem in the industry is the water waste. And is this traceable for the water usage through the process?
What do you mean?
So like
if you can trace the use, how much?
In the dyeing step,
yeah.
Can it trace how much water is being wasted?
That's something that
the fiber. It's a completely different traceability.
That's something that we have never done and would not be the first, let's say, the focus of our activities. So, but I mean, what you could do is, if you know that there is a particular process or a particular manufacturer that managed to use reduced amount of water, then he could use the marker to kind of identify his product and again differentiate it on the market and be able to show this is coming really from me. I can ensure that these requirements are respected. We cannot make any claim on the water usage, but we can link to the supplier. So the consumer or the brand can then say, okay, this comes from here, and from here we have I mean, we know that this place, this facility work according to these standards. I mean, we cannot audit the working condition. I mean, this is the same for labor or other environmental practices. We link to the source or to the location, and then from there you can draw conclusion based on what that facility or that company which practices are respected there.
Thank you.
Gautam? And then I'd love to hear from Dr. Haverhouse. I don't know if I say that right. I'd love to hear from him after, if you're available, if we can hear from you. Go ahead, Gautam.
Yeah. So if a client said, when I ask a client that, can you natural dye my fabric, and they do it chemically dyed, can your system find that out?
Well, you can, if you add the marker to the natural dyeing, then you would ensure that only what is naturally dyed is identifiable, and this way you could track it back. But
so
then
you
you
need
would
to
have
add,
to.
okay.
you could add it at the dyeing level, and on the natural dye, and then you would know that that's been used and not another one. That's how you could do that.
Okay, and one more question is, if you use your marker in the first stage, the farm stage, it comes till the end, right?
Yeah, correct.
So if it goes through the dyeing process, then can it not tell whether it's chemically dyed or natural dyed?
So you could, so in your case, you're not interested in tracing back the source eventually, but just in tracing back the dyeing step. So you wouldn't need to apply one at the source. If you're interested in both, what you could do is apply one at the source and then a different marker at the dyeing stage. And then in the finished garment, you'll be able to check and you would see the presence of both. And then you would be able to say this has been sourced in this location, has been dyed at this facility following this protocol.
Okay.
For those that don't know the textile industry, how it works, I'll just say, you know, most people, there's two basic systems for how fabrics get produced and dyed. There are vertical systems. So for instance, our company works with vertical textile mills that they literally take in bales of cotton, spin yarn, take the yarn, and either they'll dye the yarn or they'll prepare the yarn for weaving, or they'll knit it, they'll make fabric, they'll dye the fabric, they'll finish the fabric, they'll send the fabric across the other side of the street to the people who cut and sew it. It all gets done in big, giant vertical systems, most of them in Southeast Asia. And then the other system and approach is there are people who convert yarn into fabric. And then a lot of those converters will then take fabric and also do dyeing and finishing. Based on some of the questions that I'm hearing, there's some confusion about chemical dyeing versus natural dyeing. You know, generally speaking, modern textile mills do not waste a lot of water. It costs them money. And in fact, there's many different kinds of dye systems that we could talk about. Reactive dyes versus, like indigo dyeing, for example, is a non-reactive dye that people spend a lot of time nowadays worrying about how you foam and use very minimal amounts of water to make your blue jeans blue, for example. But legacy textile mills tend to do things differently than newer mills. And when you look into the industry and as you work with supply chain, if you work with brands that are making clothes, or if you're working with fabrics and things like that, then knowing who your textile mill is solves a lot of addresses many of the questions that are being asked here about the specific processes that go into, ultimately dyeing and finishing a garment, let's say. I'm curious about so DNA tracing is one way. There's also, of course, there's people in the world that are now using so it's called ICP-OES, but it's atomic emission spectroscopy that looks at the trace minerals that you can find, when a plant grows, depending on what soil it's growing in. Yeah. You can actually trace down to the field by the fingerprint of trace elements and things in fibers. I'm wondering about, just overall, advantages, disadvantages. Sounds like you can add things later. Are you working with any of the other traceability providers, either that are using mineral trace elemental analysis, or there's also, fluorescent dye markers and things like that people can put in? There's a lot of different ways to hide information in materials. I'm wondering how, if you're your own system, or if you're thinking about working with some of those other tools that are out there, some of which go all the way back to the field, some of which can be incorporated in textile supply chain in a seamless way.
We are not looking at the other systems simply because we can do what all the systems do, basically. So our technology is very versatile and cover everything that this technology can do. We can do it all. And it's, again, even more versatile because some of the system, optical system, you have limitation because you can only add it at fiber level. for instance, while we can apply that every step, basically.
Is your strategy to go to the brands, or is your strategy to try to work within supply chain? And I'll just say, like, from our perspective, anyway, people can read about natural fiber welding some other time, but our experience is that the only way you get things done in this world is when you get the brand to be on board, because the brand can help you change supply chain. But I was wondering, like, what brands you work with, or if there's any, I don't know, or that'd be my strong recommendation to you if you're struggling with implementation, is to get brand partners to sign up, because they have the power to have influence over their supply chains.
Yeah, we definitely see that. There are a few exceptions of manufacturers that are pioneers and want to do it anyway and independently. But yes, typically the book comes from the brand, absolutely.
Like, can you share brands that you work with?
So we work with some small, medium brands that are producing organic cotton, cashmere, and some are Swiss companies, like smaller companies like FTC Cashmere or Nikin. You can have a look on the website or at the profile of these companies. We work also with some smaller manufacturers, always of high quality fibers like Shirley and Weber. And then we also been working with larger brands and manufacturers. We either both individually and both as part of multi-stakeholders initiatives, so involving brands like not only Organic Cotton Accelerator and other nonprofit, but also CNA Foundation, PVH, and now we are part also of this other multi-stakeholder initiative with the United Nations that involves Stella McCartney, Hugo Boss, Burberry, and others. So we really work at this level.
We work with Hugo Boss and Burberry and Ralph Lauren, and so they are using the product right now?
So with them, we are part of this multi-stakeholder initiative where basically we are testing it into some supply chain of cotton as part of this big initiative under the lead of the United Commission for Europe.
If you're able to share, I'd be very curious what brands you're working with. I mean, we're working with literally hundreds of brands, and anyway, there's some interesting stuff that could happen.
Yeah, that's where I would love to offer you guys. I set these up with the intent to make these introductions and really get these conversations started. I'd love to help connect you and help build this. I know there's a number of you on here that work with brands and have big brands. I'm really curious, for those of you that are on the brand side, where the pull is. So much of what we hear is consumers want to know the traceability, right? And getting those brands involved. I think Josh gave a really good example earlier of the brands he's looking with and that are really interested in something like this. And yesterday when we spoke about plastics, that so many of these big companies really are putting forth the effort to show the transparency and the traceability. So I'd love to help initiate that conversation further if I can, or if you'd like me to, or however you guys would like, but definitely to bring more brand awareness and bring this forward.
I have one other quick technology question, if I can.
Yeah, please.
I guess I'm aware of there's a number of companies using DNA markers. What differentiates your DNA approach or your system from some of those others?
So our innovation has been to make these DNA markers very resistant in a way that they can withstand all of the individual processing steps that normally DNA alone would not survive or would badly survive. So we have means to stabilize DNA in a way that we can ensure full end-to-end supply chain traceability.
Trade secret or patented?
Yes, it's patented.
It's patented? Okay, so yeah. I can look that up. Okay.
Awesome. Anybody else? We're coming up on, we've got 45 minutes, 15 minutes left. I'd love intros if anybody else would like to speak up. I'd love to hear from some of you that are in this space. John Porterfield, we talk about this a lot in this in our meetings. David Rockwood, I know you're working with a lot of brands. Klaus, I don't know if you have any questions, but anybody else? Other than that, we can wrap it up if there aren't questions. But yeah, I'll stay on for at least 15 more minutes. And any questions?
I have a question.
Yeah, please.
My name is Tyree Brown. I'm an ISO 17025 analytical laboratory in Las Vegas, Nevada for C of A's. And we actually go out and pick up the sample. We do get hemp and CBD samples mailed into us nationally and from everywhere. If we go and pick up the sample ourselves, is this something? I kind of missed the beginning of it. I had another call, but sounds interesting. What if we have some equipment in our lab where we mark it, and then, you know, we know that particular sample came from the source material, and then the integrity of the buyer? I'm just kind of throwing that out there.
How do you test basically along that supply chain is what you're wanting to know for if buyers question?
Well, we're already doing the testing, but with her system here, would we stamp it after the fact? When maybe go back to the source material and say, okay, this tested out, so we're going to actually come back and apply this, these markers, or I'm not sure exactly the technology. I missed the first part of it, but just a general question, if we could be a part of it.
I'm not sure I've understood what you're doing exactly. I think if you explain that, maybe I can.
Okay, so
real quick, she's got a DNA tracker that is being used in textiles or commodities for the supply chain, tracking the supply chain. You have a lab, am I right, that's testing for quality control for CBD and cannabinoids?
Okay.
For everything. We have ICP-MS for heavy metals, GC-MS for terpenes, LC triple quad for pesticides, GC triple quad for pesticides, HPLC for potency, and also microbiology.
Yeah, okay. So basically, sometimes we work with, especially when we don't have, we need to do testing very quickly and we don't have geographical reach. Sometimes we work with other laboratories. So we could do the same with someone like you. Basically, we would train you on how to do the test, and you could provide the test, do the test on our behalf. Obviously, we would train you, we would provide you some kits, so you cannot do the test if you don't receive the kit for the testing from us. But obviously that would only work on something that has been marked. So if there is no marking event happening, that you wouldn't detect anything with our solution. So you would have to do it on the supply chains, on the lots that they are marked.
What I'm saying is once we see that it's good material and we issue the certificate of analysis, could we mark it after the fact as, okay, here's another certification that this is good?
Correct.
Or
that as well. That as well.
A new idea is what I'm suggesting.
It would make even more sense than what I said. Yeah, it would make sense, and basically would be certifying, having the forensic proof of your certification. Basically, you would have the stamp, your signature, let's say, inside the material.
Tied to the certificate. Yeah.
So you would be able to say this has passed through my laboratory. Basically, that's what it would be.
Sounds interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm gonna add you on LinkedIn, actually.
David Rockwood, I see you have your hand raised.
Yeah, well, I think what we all need to remember, the consumer has to want it. The brand needs to be able to feel that they need to provide it. Okay. We've been involved with a lot of DNA testing of materials in the food industry. Okay. And I think we forget that, that it was discussed earlier that the brands, are the dictator of the spec in the supply chain. And the consumer is what influences the brand. And I think that authenticity and traceability technology is going to be the way that we can prove all this. But I think we all need to remember consumer awareness that this is available, I think is going to be prime.
Sure. Do you hear a lot from anybody? I guess this goes back to what I'm wondering, you know, and I hear a lot in our group, the term of consumer driven, that a lot of this is being consumer driven, and brands are wanting to know, you know, brands are coming out and saying, you know, we need something that's more traceable. We need something that's more ethical. You know, our consumers are only buying or are willing to pay more because it is ethically and sustainably sourced. I see some of you nodding your head, but Michela, what's your opinion?
I mean, definitely the consumer demand is what in the end create the need for this, so that the brand want to answer consumer demand for transparency. But also, I mean, it's more and more in the interest of the brand to comply to certain criteria and to provide this transparency before it's even demand. And I'm saying this because, again, there are more and more regulations that make companies accountable for what's happening on their supply chain, even in a country where they're not headquartered, but where their supply chains are distributed. So this is independent a bit from the consumer, but it's something that the brands needs to do in order to comply and not to, and avoid also scandals. Look at the case of the cotton bans and bans on import that have recently been in place. So
I agree. Josh?
It's vital. It needs to happen. The traceability needs to be there. The consumer is pulling this through the market. The reason brands are willing to put the effort into producing hemp products is because they want to see, they want a better story to convince the consumer to buy more product. It really is that simple as we see it anyway. You know, it's being pulled through by the consumer. We're seeing this coming out of this lockdown COVID era, that, you know, people are more interested in having sustainability, and traceability is part of sustainability. So I think it's vital. This kind of tech is amazing. I think it needs to be adapted to hemp in some way to make sure it's not, you know, adding worse input criteria to hemp, because I think that is the challenge. There's a lot of historical data for hemp that isn't so great. So if we can tell a good story and use technology to help us tell that story, it's vital to be able to move this forward.
Well, and so much of this I'd like to get a handle on, of course, before we're trying to dig ourselves out, like the cotton industry, right? Let's really try to get something sustainable, not only for the brands, but for our industry, so that we can show, you know, where it's coming from and what's happening, especially as we're building the industry. So thank you so much for coming today. I've had lots of comments saying great conversation and that they really appreciate you. Remember, everybody, I will post this. It will be recorded and shared online. And so it's available on our YouTube channel. The presentation will be available, your contact information. If anybody else or everybody that's been on the call, I will send out an email as well with a link and a transcription, so that the questions that were asked, you guys will all have access to as well. Is there anybody else that has anything they want to add or share, or any closing remarks before we end? I feel like 10 a.m. everybody's asleep. Come on, you guys, wake up.
Thank you, Michela. It was really interesting.
Well,
thank you, everyone. Thank you, Mending, for having me. And hopes that some interesting discussion will come out also in the next days. Some of you that appear to be very interested, and I mean, I see quite some potential, again, from what I said. And when you're building an industry, so it's you really have the chance to do it right from the beginning, instead of doing the retro engineering work that other supply chain are doing, which is way less efficient and way more expensive for them, right? So it's a great opportunity.
Well, I think that this would be, yeah, I know there's a few of you on this call that I'd love to continue the conversation and help make the connection. And so I will continue to work the relationship as well for everybody. But thank you again for joining. We'll see you all next week. I was just going to look when our next meeting is. It's really bad. I don't have it memorized. I should. Let's see. Oh, next is Thursday. So our next education series is going to be next Thursday. I don't have anything but one event next week. So that's nice. Woo! I feel like I can flap my arms. But other than that, you guys, thank you very much. We'll see you on Thursday. The link is posted on our LinkedIn event.
Thank you.
Other than that, thank you guys.
Thank you. Bye.
Shout out if you need anything.